So, have you guys ever had one of those days where you're just so tired? So, yeah, pretty much everyone, right? At some point, if not all the time. People are moms or single parents. Yesterday was a day that I, like many days this past week, overcommitted. I felt like I just wanted to sleep in. I went to bed early the night before, and I'd slept really a long time finally, and I just wanted to sleep in. I was so tired. But I had already agreed to meet my dad and my bonus mom, my stepmom Frances, at the Cesar Chavez breakfast. And I also agreed to go with them to a local political party county fundraiser event yesterday evening, and I think I had a couple other things going on in between that. And as tired as I was, it's nothing compared to the plight of people who are maybe laborers, migrant workers, or even just single parents in here or out there who have maybe done 2 shifts back to back for work, and they have to still have their duties at home. So I am going to talk to you about my experiences yesterday, mostly at the Cesar Chavez breakfast. So the funny thing is, I showed up, and then all of a sudden, sitting at my table was our president, Christy Stockman. So she and I think, gathered, got tickets for free. Like because I don't know how affordable that breakfast would have been, but while it was the first annual Cesar Chavez breakfast, it was the 22nd annual March and Festival. So it started off with me having misheard my dad. He said, it's at the Art Center. And I said, the Art Center downtown? He said, the center where my statue is. And I didn't put I just thought he had another statue. My dad likes to sculpt at the Yellow Building Art Center. So I went there first, and I was like, dang it, he meant the Garcia Art Center. So that is a building that is on Agnes near Crosstown. And it's a Texas A&M University building, but it's a fabulous community resource. So I highly recommend you check it out at any point. They have a community garden, they have tutoring, it's a great place. So at that event, I actually got to meet, I made a point of meeting when I saw he was there, Mr. Eddie Canales, who unfortunately has an injury today and is not able to be here, so I hope you don't mind me standing in. And I also got to meet Sister Norma Pimentel, and wow, what an amazing experience. And I saw people we already know, friends of our church. Isabel Areza, is that how you pronounce her name? She was called unexpectedly up. I volunteered for this, just so y'all know. But I was going to be your worship associate today, but I volunteered. And so Isabel came up unexpectedly, not planning on it, having to honor some people doing work with colonias in the Corpus Christi area. And I'd never heard of that, so I learned a lot of new things yesterday. I learned about colonias, and in the evening I learned about I'll share that in a moment. So I want to take a moment to share with you a quick bio. First I want to tell you what Mr. Canales' background was, just because that was who you were going to see originally. And I just want you to know that he is he's a civil rights activist and former union organizer, and he's the founder of the South Texas Human Rights Center in Falfurrias, Texas. And the mission of the South Texas Human Rights Center is a community-based organization in Falfurrias dedicated to the promotion, protection, defense, and exercise of human rights and dignity in South Texas. Our mission is to end death and suffering on the Texas-Mexico border through community initiatives. And one of the other things when he was introduced at the breakfast yesterday was that he's very involved in the identification and relocation, the getting the migrants who have crossed over who die and their bodies are found. He helps, he's very involved with helping identify them and get them to their rightful owner. So they do good work. He does good work, and so I think maybe he probably just overextended himself yesterday. So I hope you're not too disappointed with me. But Sister Norma Pimentel, wow, what an inspiration. I'm going to read for you the brief bio about her in case you, like me, had never heard of her. I felt shamed that I had never heard of her. Probably had and just hadn't been paying attention. Sister Pimentel is a globally renowned humanitarian and social justice advocate who works with immigration children and families along the U.S.-Mexico border. She has been featured on national and global media for her tireless and relentless humanitarian work. Most recently, she received the prestigious 2022 Concordia Leadership Award. She is the Executive Director for Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley. This woman, what an inspiration. I'm going to read for you. So I'm kind of a dork, but I'm also an academic, right? I have worked at Del Mar College since I moved back to Corpus in 2017, and I also have higher ed experience at Texas Women's University and University of North Texas. So I kind of like to take notes, but I was taking notes yesterday with the thought that I would change up some of my planned worship associate words to share with y'all, and now I'm putting them as part of the sermon. Hopefully we'll have it be a little bit cohesive. So one of the things that I wanted to share with y'all about her is she just had this calming presence. When I researched her a little bit online later in the day, I saw that she is the Pope's favorite nun. And she actually didn't mention that in her words, but she did share that he is an excellent pope for these issues, for helping the needy, helping anyone that needs assistance, and he's getting in some trouble for it. And that's really kind of shameful, right? Even within his own faith. So she didn't plug, oh, and I'm his favorite nun. So she's a very humble woman. All right, so one of the things she said was, when we welcome the least among us, we welcome God. And I thought that was so profound, especially in light of the fact that we have so many people who I think I think that's why many of us are here, in experimenting with UU or consider themselves a Unitarian Universalist, because we feel like the creedal religions that maybe some of us have been a part of aren't doing that. They're not welcoming, whether it's gays in that congregation or, Jesus with the prostitutes. Everybody is welcome, and I think that that's one of the things that many of us have seen, is that we'd like to see ourselves as followers of Christ or the Buddha or whoever our spiritual leaders are, but not necessarily Christians or Buddhists or whatever. And then some of us still take with us those things that make us most comfortable. Like to call out my bonus mom, she calls herself a cafeteria Catholic, which I like that term. I think that's really cute. Okay, so another thing that she talked about was holy chaos. So I love this term, and Sister Pimentel was talking about experiences of helping people in the McAllen area, people that were crossing over, helping them with things, and she talked about how we are, Americans, she says, we're very clockwork. We like to do things efficiently. So we have these lines, and then children were separated from the person they crossed with, whether it may not be their mother or father, but because of concerns about human trafficking, they were getting separated from a grandparent or an aunt or uncle. And so there's all these things that ends up backfiring. And she says, we just need to let people be their chaotic selves. And she said, I like to call it holy chaos. And I really like that term. So anyway, she also said we must treat each other with respect. And this is when she brought up the Pope, which starts with listening to the other person. She said that our current Pope is the one that tells people, listen to another. And this is something I greatly struggle with, right? I want to say my thing, I interrupt a lot, and I'm working on it. So feel free to call me out on it, guys. And then she told this story of one day when they were helping people in the McAllen area, and they somehow beat local authorities to a bus station, and they got them all to go to a church, Sacred Heart, I think, or some Catholic church in that area. But she told this story about at some point authorities showed up to ask her what are you, and I guess the chief authority at that place said, "What are you doing, sister?" And she said, "Restoring human dignity." And that guy backed away for a moment to think about her words, and then he came back and he said, "If I had a magic wand, what would it do?" And she said, "Showers." So by the end of that day, there was I didn't know such a thing existed, but there was a mobile unit with like 8 showers for people to be able to take showers. I think that's just fabulous. And then she talked about how some of these methods that they've had there, they're all I can't speak, but that incorporate all these services for people. Only one was focused on in Brownsville area, and so not as many people were doing there were people actually homeless in Brownsville because they were just really, okay, you're released to go find your American that's sponsoring you. But they might not have a credit card or any way to get a hold of them. So there's some people actually being living homeless in those situations. So I do want to take a moment to actually share, since I have the time, when I did some research on her, I found a story that she shared, and it was a summation of an experience that really hurt her. It was back in, she said she was, a center in McAllen had 150,000 people, this was from the Catholic News Service, July 12, 2019. And so this center was seeing 900 to 1,000 people a day, and some families arrive at the center with their children, others have been joyfully reunited. But she talked about an experience she had at a detention center. That's where I should have started my highlight here. And it was a terrible experience for her. There were children packed in cells with no showers, no room to sit or lie down. I saw these kids, this is quoting her, "I saw these kids looking through these glass windows, all these little faces just staring, full of tears, looking at you like, 'Please help me,'" she recalled. She initially was stopped from entering one cell, but when she said she wanted to pray, she was allowed inside. She said, these servicemen the guards weren't going to not let her come in to pray with the kids. It was the most difficult thing I've ever lived in my life, to see those kids around me, close to 100 kids in that cell, all crying, all looking at me with tears in the face, pulling my dress and saying, "Please get me out of here." But she said that there was nothing she could do because U.S. policy at the time was not to reunite families who were separated. "Our country is," this is still her quoted, "our country is suffering from a grave humanitarian problem," she said. "The policy of separating families is heartless and put in place by people who didn't care about the pain and suffering it was going to cause." More about this later. "We all have a responsibility to do something about that, to help people, to do away with indifference, as if it's okay to discard people because they're different than us." She said, "So many people are suffering and we are silent." She said, "It seems Americans live in a culture of comfort. It's almost like we live in a bubble where people protect themselves from not feeling uncomfortable. So I say that I go around popping bubbles so they can see things for what they are." I really was glad I read this because she didn't say that particular thing yesterday, and I like the idea of that. Filter bubbles is another topic. We could do a whole service on that, that every single one of us in here could search the same thing in a Google search and we would all get different results. And that has to do a little bit with probably search algorithms and paid sites, but also filter bubbles and algorithms. So anyway, the bubble analogy really did it for me. So now I want to, and if you didn't know much about her, just, she is an American. She spent a lot of her childhood going back and forth between the border while her parents were waiting for legal status, and she joined Sisterhood, the Catholic Church, against the wishes of her parents, but because she was called to do that. So I wanted to share that because I'm going to mention her again briefly. So because there has been a lot about Cesar Chavez, I wanted to, and about nonviolence, I wanted to share just a little bit about, Cesar Chavez wrote some works, and one of them is Lessons of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he talked about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and about his peace and actually I wanted to read part of this from you. This is from Cesar Chavez. Dr. King was also radical in his beliefs about violence. He learned how to successfully fight hatred and violence with the unstoppable power of nonviolence. He once stopped an armed mob saying, "We are not advocating violence. We want to love our enemies. I want you to love our enemies. Be good to them. This is what we live by. We must meet hate with love." I think that's what I want to share about that from right now. Well, except Cesar Chavez continued, "The men who rule this country today never learned the lessons of Dr. King. They never learned that nonviolence is the only way to peace and justice. Our nation continues to wage war upon its neighbors and upon itself. The powers that be rule over a racist society filled with hatred and ignorance. Our nation continues to be segregated along racial and economic lines." And that's actually where I want to turn for a moment and talk about my evening event. And I won't go into too much detail since it was a political fundraiser dinner thing, but I wanted to share that actually it was very relevant in a historical context. The man who spoke was a man named Terry Canales, and unfortunately I didn't get to ask Eddie Canales today if there was any relation. I'm guessing not, but never hurts to ask. And he spoke about his great uncle, I think it was his great uncle, J.T. Canales. And apparently there's a lot of history regarding the King Ranch and their land, and so it's kind of interesting. I didn't go into a lot of detail, and he says I'm not saying it's the King Ranch of today, I'm not saying these are the people of today, but he just went into a little bit of history, and mostly what I learned, remember I said I learned about Colonias, thank you. And last night, I learned about the Porvenir massacre. Have anybody in here heard of it? Right? I mean, I was floored by it. Apparently, records of it were sealed for 50 years. So it happened in 1918, and J.T. Canales was the only Hispanic state representative, actually senator at the time. And he was, Terry is in our state office now, and he said that there is racism today, but it's a different kind of thing. Like, it's more like when they were setting up the new RGB school system, don't make your mascot Hispanic. It's a little bit more that type of stuff, but not as blatant. But when his great uncle was in the state senate, they would say, "Oh, the wetback from, the wetback can speak." So it was kind of that more crucial. And he did actually spend some time presiding over trials about this Porvenir massacre. And it was an incident in January 28, 1918, outside the village of Porvenir in Presidio County, Texas, in which Texas Rangers and local ranchers, with the support of the U.S. Cavalry, that's a relatively recent discovery that it was actually backed by the U.S. military, killed, and here in the Wikipedia article it says 15 unarmed Mexican-American boys and men. It was actually quite a bit more serious, and there was nothing, the Texas Rangers, Company B, despite having no evidence that the Porvenir villages had been involved in recent thefts and killings of ranchers, the Rangers separated these boys and men from the littlest kids were the ones spared, but 13 and older were killed, just like that. And that's just terrible. I'm glad that this is not an all-age service, because I hadn't thought about what I was saying. So it's just interesting to learn all these things and realize that we're closing ourselves off from history. Y'all were, if you didn't already know this about me in the service, I'm a librarian. I started my time at Del Mar as an academic advisor, but I'm now in the library full-time, and there's a lot going on right now, y'all may be aware. And it's not just K through 12 and public school, it's a little bit more involved than that, but that's obviously where the bigger concerns are. And Mr. Terry Canales mentioned These are my dorky notes from last night, but it's not as many. History sanitized is not history. And I thought that was so interesting because he pointed out in there, he said, I don't think any of you in here would believe that by trying to teach these events that that have happened in our history would say that we want you to feel guilty for any role your ancestors may have played in it. We're not saying that. None of us are. We should not be hiding from our mistakes. We want to own up to these things. We must accept our past in order to move forward. And looks like I duplicated it, so that's it. That's what I want to share with him. And I'm actually almost out of time, so I'm going to close my sermon with another person that was at the breakfast yesterday. And that was a friend of ours, right, Father Bruce. And he read a prayer at the end of the breakfast. So there was more activities, and I'd like to challenge many of us next year. Christy, I think, and Francis, I think, walked the march. I didn't know about the march. I had plans, so I kept with my plans. And Christy actually must drive around with the banner in her car or something because she carried the UU banner. And by the way, I just want to say that political party fundraiser last night started with a prayer. And it was a prayer that was so welcoming. It would definitely be UU approved, and religious groups were mentioned, including UU, Unitarian Universalists. I was so happy with that. And so it was a little just concerning at first. I'm like, what, a prayer at this? But it actually worked really well. It was a very accepting, bow your heads if you so please. I just loved everything about it. It was I very much approved. So Father Bruce ended the breakfast yesterday with this prayer that was written by Cesar Chavez. It is known as the prayer for the farm worker struggle. Show me the suffering of the most miserable, so I will know my people's plight. Free me to pray for others, for you are present in every person. Help me take responsibility for my own life so that I can be free at last. Grant me courage to serve others, for in service there is true life. Give me honesty and patience so that I can work with other workers. Bring forth song and celebration so that the Spirit will be alive among us. Let the Spirit flourish and grow so that we will never tire of the struggle. Let us remember those who have died for justice, for they have given us life. Help us love even those who hate us so we can change the world. And Father Bruce changed the ending Amen to Viva la Casa, and then they had these flags, Si se puede, yes we can, on our tables, and many people took them on the marches, and next year I hope we can get together a group of us to go. So thank you very much.